Hey guys, welcome to a new series in Planet Coaster. This one's a bit different from the ones I've made so far, and it's also a bit different from much of the things that I see being made by the community at the moment and many of the series that I see running right now. In that many of the things that I see at the moment I think are really focused on very large scale, kind of impressive and very massive scenery, a lot of large landscapes, very large theming, and just in general either really expensive theme parks or just playing out into the fantasy kind of corner, what I see quite a lot, with a bigger focus on making, interesting sort of scenes and landscapes instead of focusing on like the realism aspects of small theme parks. And that is actually exactly what I want to try with this park. I want to try to make like a small, charming family kind of park. Probably operated by a family as well. I think some good examples to compare it with in real life are like Tripsdrill in Germany or Hansa Park also in Germany. Perhaps a bit of Silver Dollar City in terms of how it's going to be some more smaller and rustic theming. And I think Chessington's, especially in terms of the scale and how the theming in general is laid out, can work quite well as an example as well. Basically what I want to go for is just a smaller park with, smaller scenery, less of a budget, but still a park that is focused on scenery. It's not going to be a park like Michigan's Adventure or Six Flags in that it's going to be focused on the rides. I mean, I'm still me, and I'm still going to want to focus on scenery, but it's, a different kind of park than what I've been seeing, in Planet Coaster since the release of the game, and it's something which I am more familiar with, actually, I would say, from Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 experience when compared to, fantasy projects on a large scale like Alfheim. So in that kind of sense, it's kind of going back to my roots and what I like quite a lot, and it also adds an extra challenge. You might say that it's maybe a bit easier to go for a smaller and low budget theme park, but I think especially with the low amount of content that there is in the game, and the fact that I haven't seen this been done before, or at least not much, it actually adds a pretty good challenge. And personally, I want to get like a good layout and charming atmosphere in general with this park in, and I'm not really sure how that's going to happen because, well, that's actually something that I think is surprisingly tough to get right, and it definitely isn't as easy as just making very large detailed structures to make something look very impressive. Now, to talk about what I am building for a second here, I wanted to start off with the entrance of the park. For one, I actually wanted to build a custom entrance because I do want to get all of the realistic touches of a theme park in here, and since the original entrance of Planet Coaster is just a pre-made entrance that you can't really do anything about, but it also doesn't look as realistic, there are no ticket booths and there are no turnstiles or anything of that nature, I wanted to make my own small entrance, not to mention that this is going to be a small rustic park, kind of like Tripsdrill and all the things that I've mentioned. So I wanted to have an entrance that also fits into that theme. And now what is that theme, you might want to ask? Well, I've actually got quite a bit of this laid out already. I want to start off with a German theme, or at least more specifically it's going to be Bavarian-ish, but it's also going to be a little bit vague. I do want to keep my options open a bit, and I guess I could call it Theme Park German, because you're not going to find this strict kind of theming in any kind of real German village in the south of Germany. But it's the overall idea which I like to go for. Supposedly this would also be a small theme park somewhere in the German countryside, and since I want this to be like a small, realistic, kind of grown over time kind of theme park, I want to start with a core that has a German theme that more or less has all the basic facilities and basic rides in a sort of compact layout. And then the idea is that over time the theme park just kind of grew and added some more attractions and other areas. And so I want to move into a Dutch area and a Scandinavian area at some point later during the series, and those are basically the three areas that I've got more or less planned out at the moment. I don't have that much planned out, though I do have a surprising amount of things planned out already, like the different coasters and rides that I want to have in the different sections, and a general park layout. So in that sense it is going to be more planned out, I would say, and less winging it than I usually would, because I do want to focus more on composition and park layouts and making this entire thing come together as a realistic park that could, really be parts of like some sort of real life landscape. And for that reason, I do want to just put some extra emphasis and give some extra attention to those things that make it more realistic, like getting the right layouts in and kind of planning your rides and everything beforehand. Also, I do want to restrict myself with a couple of things during this build, like I want to limit my budget, not make things too expensive, because obviously this kind of park wouldn't have that much money to spend, and I also want to make sure that I keep it within a certain amount of land. So at some point during this episode, I am pretty sure, though I didn't film it, I decided to draw some borders around the land and make those pretty tight as well, just to force myself to work within the pretty tight strip of land that I have for this park. And it also kind of has a bit of a square-ish and edged shape to it, that it could just be built anywhere near a town or in the middle of some farm fields in any kind of rural area in Germany. And that's, well, the idea of how I wanted to lay out the park. I may even make a parking lot outside here just to give it that extra touch of realism, but not entirely sure if I'll really get into things like that. Can be quite time consuming and I haven't really tried it before, but if I do such things, there might very definitely be some things that I won't record in time lapses and just kind of do in streams and things like that. Just because I figured lately I found that quite a bit of fun, and I don't want to record too many time lapses while I'm streaming, just because talking at the same time while you're playing a game just makes it a lot harder and a lot slower with reading the chat and everything as well. So I do want to, stream some things which might not end up in the time lapses, just so you know. But yeah, anyway, about this entrance itself, it's a pretty simple building, as you can see. What's interesting about it is that it's just a really small entrance. It's nothing like the big entrances of Disney or Universal that you would see. It's only got one ticket booth, which is on the right, which I'm not 100% sure if I want to keep just one ticket booth, because it is a little bit out of proportion with the 3 turnstiles that I have over here, which is quite a few for, well, the very small park that it's going to be. By the way, I need to give a shout out to Jake C for the turnstiles designs, because taking the round pillar and putting the fences on it as turnstiles was definitely not my idea. I actually saw that in Jake C's Let's Play. By the way, I can also definitely recommend watching that Let's Play if you're into, more realistic parks and a focus on more realism instead of making very large scale parks or focusing a lot on scenery. His Let's Plays are my favorite so far. He's, a real coaster enthusiast, and he has all the details of coasters and laying out their areas very neatly right. And his stuff is just really beautiful. I can definitely recommend it if you're into, the realistic side of things. So I put his turnstiles in there and had the ticket booth on the right side there. Just as the entrance doesn't have to be anything interesting. I may very well at some point in the future though add a sign on top of the roof on which I can put the name of the park, but interestingly that's something which I haven't talked about yet. The park, as of doing this commentary at the moment, has no name. I am thinking about something like Germanica or Germanicum or something along those lines. The idea is that the theme will be generally Germanic, not to be confused with German. It's kind of a theme based on the general Germanic area where there's Germanic people and Germanic languages, and I figured for that reason I could get all of the scenery or all of the countries around the North Sea in, so I could get some German architecture in there, a Dutch part and a Scandinavian part, and that just seemed like a good way to bundle those themes together. But I'm not entirely sure what the name exactly for it is going to be. I might very well change that. I'm always open for suggestions, by the way, though I never promise that I can take any of these suggestions and actually use them, so I'm definitely open for it, but please also be open to be rejected, because I get many ideas and quite picky about the names as well, hence why I haven't actually been able to choose one, even though I've already planned quite lots of this park ahead already. Now, first thing that I wanted to do in the park is make the entrance plaza behind the entrance, though I won't get to decorating it in this episode, but it's just so I could work on the general area and have an idea of what I wanted to do. Now, I knew that at this point here, I wanted to have a small plaza, kind of square-ish shape with 2 roads sticking out, one road just kind of going straight ahead and one to the right, where I can have more of the German area at some point in the future. There isn't going to be like one hub from which you can enter all the areas, because you know this park wasn't entirely planned beforehand realistically, so I didn't want to divide it into areas that were built at the same time, so just sticking with the German area for now. But I did want to have like a nice square to have an entrance and have some buildings around and have the main most important facilities too. So there's going to be a restaurant, which is this building right here, and some toilets, maybe some other stuff that I want to have around the entrance, but this is going to be like a small, pretty important little plaza, although it's not going to be anything big, and I do still have quite a good amount of planters and trees around it as well, so hopefully in the end it should look quite cozy instead of being this large open square. Now this restaurant is quite interesting because it's more or less the first of the theme, the first proper building of the theme, so it should be a pretty good indication of what the rest is going to look like. I wanted to go with the half-timbered buildings, which you very commonly find in the lower parts of Germany. There are definitely many different kinds of German architecture. It's really hard almost to talk about one style, but I really wanted to try the timber architecture, or at least the half-timbered houses. Just because it's, for one, it's a style that I really like. It's also one that I'm very familiar with. If you remember Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 Custom Scenery Days, Shy Guy's Alpine Village was one of the most popular sets out there for the game. And there was a lot of like stucco and timber frameworks in there, and it was very common kind of scenery elements in many Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 parks because of that, so do have some good experience with it. But it's also a style which I haven't really seen much in Planet Coaster before, but I actually do think it's very viable with the different the fences and the balconies that you can sink into buildings, and even the driftwood blanks, which are really good for getting those extra wooden details in, or those wooden crosses where you just want a smaller part or a different texture. So yeah, I think there's loads of different opportunities to mess with when it comes to the shape and texture of this half-timbered stuff. Though there's actually timber around all of the sides of this building, which is going to make it quite a bit unique. For the rest of the buildings, I do want to focus on having wooden details on the fronts but not on the sides, but this building is pretty much has paths all around it, so I also wanted to have like framework going all around it as well. But the woodwork is still an interesting topic that I want to talk about a bit, because it's one of the points that I want to get to in this series. Not specifically the woodwork itself, but just texturing in general. One of the things which well, probably everybody at this point really notice in Planet Coaster is that with the same like limited amount of decorations at the moment, with just a few kinds of textures, like you eventually just end up having everything look the same. At least in terms of colors, you just find a lot of reappearing textures, and even if you mix them into different shapes and all kinds of different themes like Elvish and fantasy and whatever you can think of, you're still using these same textures that you very commonly see, and it's one thing that's been bugging me quite a bit. And what I've been figuring would be quite a nice thing to try with this as well is to, you know, see how much I can not just add a variety to the textures, but also use textures in a way that you normally don't really see it. So, for one example, which is a pretty good example I think, I wanted to get a roof which looks kind of like the red shingled roofs that you see around the Alpine areas, or especially around, you know, the German areas. I guess you could also just refer to the tiled roofs, but there is no way that I can actually make this tiled, so I figured I would sink some doors into the roof and kind of see how that works, and I think it actually makes a pretty decent shingle roof, if you do at least make sure to kind of vary them a bit and place them in a bit of an like offset way every now and then to create those offset shingles. I'm quite happy with how that roof turned out. And the same kind of goes for the walls as well. I wanted to have stucco walls that have a really rough sort of grey-ish texture to it. It's not entirely white, doesn't look entirely clean, just has a bit of like older touch to it. And I think it's a pretty nice way to get it in there by using the, I'm not even sure what it's called, but like the concrete bottom piece that is meant for like walls of, I don't know, Spanish buildings or something like that, but it works quite well, I think, to make stucco. There are well, many different ways to do this that I do want to try in the future, just to get slightly different textures for different buildings, like sinking chimneys into buildings and sinking foundation pieces for any kind of scenery objects into buildings to create just slightly different textures for the walls. But I do want to watch out with that a little bit, because as you might notice, I am making very small buildings here and very like cozy, charming things instead of very large scenery objects. But at the same time, this is quite a lag fest, and these buildings together probably have more objects than the entire castle in Elfheim even did, even though they're very small, because I'm using all of these different objects and sticking them into walls to get the exact textures that I want. And I want to try to do that not too much, and that's why I kind of like this wall, because it's pretty flat. But why I don't want to start sinking too many chimneys and too many scenery objects into walls to make new textures, because then the faces will definitely start stacking up. And one of the things that just create a lot of lag in the game at the moment is the fact that there are many objects that you don't see because they're into walls or into the ground just to create some sort of detail. But they are actually getting rendered by the game. So the roof right now of this building is made out of many different doors, but you only see one part of the door, yet the entire door is getting rendered. And I do reckon I might want to watch out with that, because this park may well lag a lot if I don't start watching out at least a little bit with the faces. But then again, of course, it's not something that I can really avoid in this case. Because I wanted to have this roof anyway, it's just something that I do want to keep at least a little bit efficient. Because, well, working hard is one thing, but working smart is another thing altogether. Overused quote, probably. Anyway, that is just about it for today, so thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time, in which I'll work on the entrance plaza over here and a bit more as well.